Hello and welcome to another episode of the Public Global. I am Ajay Prakash. At the World Economic Forum last year in January 2024, a global risk report was presented. The Global Risk Report analyzes global risks over a 1, 2, and 10-year horizon to support decision makers in adopting a dual vision that balances short and longer term risks. And not surprisingly, leaving aside the threat of a large scale war, the biggest threat to humanity turns out to be misinformation and disinformation. And what was really surprising for me, the top spot here has been taken by none other than ourselves, India. It is also said that the risk of misinformation and disinformation increases in India as we approach any election, be it the general elections or any state election. Just to clarify to our viewers, misinformation is the inadvertent spread of false information without intent to harm, while disinformation is false information designed to mislead others and is deliberately spread with the intent to confuse fact and fiction. Identifying and combating the spread of misinformation and disinformation is a major challenge in the increasingly complex information landscape of the 21st century. The reason this is a challenge is that, according to recent data, reading newspapers and magazines in India is significantly declining, with a large portion of the population now preferring to access news online through digital platforms like smartphones and social media apps, leading to a drop in print readership. I think you might be able to relate to this in your own home. And this is true particularly among the younger generation of our country. According to a report in 2022, an average Indian spends about 194 minutes daily on social media platforms. 89% of online users are active every day on social media, while 22% and 12% are active every day on OTT content and online gaming apps. While reading news online or accessing magazines online is not a bad thing in itself, but then when one is online, there are too many distractions. There's always a notification bell going on, probably a phone call coming in, so one easily gets distracted and then goes off somewhere else. Secondly, you may think you are independent to choose what you see online or read online, but is that really so? Our window to the knowledge world is now restricted to about 3.5 inch by 7 inches. That is the screen size of a typical mobile these days. Now compare this with the old newspaper which we used to read, which was about 1.5 feet by 2 feet, or even a magazine which was about 10 to 12 inches square. It was with far greater ease that one could skim through the headlines of the newspaper, skip the pages, stop at news items which you want to read in detail, look at advertisements, and then we had the special interest group pages like sports and films. Within 10-15 minutes, you could get a gist of the entire news, what's happening around you, and what's happening in the world. Well, in case you don't like the newspaper, stop subscribing and get another one. Or better, keep both of them so that you get a better viewpoint of the world. The reason I say that we have lost the power to pick and choose what we want is because we are connected to the internet. And we have too small a front end, only 7 by 3 inches, to interact with the internet. Behind that, there is Google, and there are several other organizations which are bringing you all the content through their networks. And on top of that, as if this wasn't enough, we have a government sitting there which provides the so called regulations. If they were regulations alone, it wouldn't have been so bad. But the governments at times go overboard. Instead of regulating, they start dictating. And that becomes even more difficult for you to get the correct information that you are seeking. Imagine that you're in a place like China or North Korea, you would never really know what's happening in the world, let alone in your own country. This is almost equivalent to the censorship which is applied to the print media. Go back to 1975 during the emergency, that's what exactly happened. Every news was filtered by the Prime Minister's office before it was allowed to be printed. All the social media apps in every country are subject to pressure and threats from the government. It becomes very easy to implicate any social media app. We remember the days of Ravi Shankar Prasad and how he called in Mark Zuckerberg over some posts which had come up on Facebook. And more recently, we have seen, according to the Congress, that Amit Shah had written to X, which was earlier Twitter, asking them to delete one of his Rajya Sabha speeches where he had mentioned something about Baba Sahib Ambedkar. And then we have the search engines like Google who play the role as Jekyll and Hyde. On the one hand, they provide excellent services for you to interact with the internet, get what you want very quickly. But on the other hand, with something which goes unnoticed is that gradually they are restricting your search. Because the more you keep looking at a certain thing, Google starts showing you more of the same. And over a period of time, it cuts you off from the rest of the information which may have been useful to you. And very soon you start living in a make believe world, a world which as you would like to see. You start believing that everyone in the world is the same as you. By 2010, there was enough infrastructure within the country to give a reasonably fast internet. There were enough smartphones with the people. What was required was only a backend, some machinery, some institution which would keep pushing messages. This the BJP realized very early. They got a first mover advantage. By 2011-12, they had a back-end team which started pushing propaganda messages to the public. You may recollect those days how we were told about the 2G scam, the coal scam, this scam, that scam, the non performing Manmohan Singh government, the policy paralysis, and it was mixed with religion. You had Baba Ramdev going on stage and crying out loud about the black money, and anyone who spoke against them was termed as anti national or anti Hindu. And why did the public lap up all this propaganda information? The reason is simple. The BJP used what is known as message bombarding. Message bombarding is a cyber attack that involves sending large number of messages to a victim in a short period of time. The goal is to harass the victim or disrupt their device. Also, which is more important, this doesn't give time to the victim to react to any message. We all saw how the BJP backend used to send message after message after message. The opposition was nowhere to respond. It was taken by surprise. So people were not even given the time to think about it. They started believing that this, whatever the BJP is saying, is actually happening. So, what do you do when you get tens of messages like this every day and you don't have time to read them? And even if you read them, you can't do a fact check, and your own knowledge is also limited. The first thing you do is you may send it to your own friends, your own created special interest group, because you believe that everyone in the world is just like you and they will be very interested to read this new thing which is coming from a political party, something which was never known till now. So, what happens? You start playing the role of a message switching operator. Now, in the olden days, there used to be what we used to call teleprinters. These were machines which was connected over very slow speed telephone lines all across the world, point to point. If I have to send a message, I will write it down on a piece of paper, give it to a teleprinter operator. He or she will key it in just like a typewriter, and at the other end, the message will get printed. Now, when it has to go to multiple places, there were these hubs where teleprinters were kept. There were operators on either side. They would again keep repeating the same. So the operators would never really know the content of the message. They would keep sending each message from one place to the other. It is much later that the teleprinter ribbons came out, which eased out many of the teleprinter operator jobs. The social media apps are here to stay. The government will keep changing. A new government will come someday. It will act the same way as the government today is acting. Today, BJP might seem to be losing the social media game. Tomorrow, someone else will be there. It is up to us how we react. The key to countering this is that you have to be much more vigilant. You have to start reading all over again outside of the social media, or be smart enough to beat Google at its own game. Learn how to do searches by deleting your history. Look at pages which you haven't looked earlier. Don't keep reading the same thing all over again, and stop believing whatever you receive on social media channels, especially on WhatsApp and Facebook. To end today's episode, I'm going to show you how the Bharatiya Janata Party uses the social media platform to spread disinformation. I have chosen a very innocuous post which you might have seen on your social media channels. It's about the top Indian origin CEOs who, according to the BJP, are ruling the world. It's a different matter and not a discussion point today. That if you go and search Google and search for persons of Indian origin who were jailed in the US, you will get a much larger number of Indians who have been convicted in US and elsewhere abroad. Just yesterday, there was this news that there are many Indians among the 185 employees who have been fired by Apple, who, according to Apple, were involved in a salary fraud by misusing CSR funds. And then, not so long ago, there was the famous case of Rajat Gupta, who was sent to prison in the US on charges of insider trading. So, yes, to remain positive, it's good to be proud of people who went from India, settled in the US, and did well for themselves and the companies that they worked for. Indians abroad are just like any other community. There are extremely good people, there are average people, there are the not so good people, and then there are a few guys who are real down criminals. And it's not just Hindu Indians who are doing well abroad. If you search the internet, there's a whole long list of Indian Muslims as well who have done equally well. A few names here you might know: Asad Abidi, professor of electrical engineering at UCLA and a member of the National Academy of Engineering. Then we have Farid Zakaria, Newsweek editor. We see him on TV. Sadaf Jaffer, the first Muslim female Indian origin who was the mayor of Montgomery in New Jersey. And the list goes on. If one would go a little deeper into this list of CEOs who are ruling the world, well, here are some of the details. Point number one, look at the last column. You'll find many of them are second generation immigrants. That is, they are Americans by birth. They have nothing to do with India. Secondly, they have all studied in premier institutes within the country. Now, if they did not do well abroad, then it would be a matter of surprise. Having studied in places like IIT or IIT BHU or St. Stephen's College, Delhi, there is no reason why they should not succeed. This is the same list. The second part, you'll find like Vasant Narasimham, Novartis CEO, is a second generation American. We have Neeraj Shah from Cornell University. He's a second generation American. Amrapali Gan. So all these people are born and brought up in the US. They have very little to do with India. If one has really to be proud and some people to look up to, I would rather have this list. J.R.D. Tata, Ratan Tata, Sir C.V. Raman, Vikram Sarabhai, Homi Bhabha, and hundreds of more people who always had the option to go abroad to the US or elsewhere and work in better conditions. These people decided to come back to India and work for their homeland in very difficult situations, in very difficult conditions, when India really did not have the kind of money to pay them even what they deserved. Thank you for watching. I look forward to your comments on this episode.